Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Mr. Pad Paramahansa, Parudikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad's Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad's Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai, Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. On this 28th day of February 2023 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 13 entitled Nature, the Enjoyer and Consciousness. And we're on texts 6 to 7. Is it not? Did we go through that? Oh, we did do that. We did that. Okay. Rather, I'm sorry. 8 to 12, which is on 537. Hopefully, everyone's books. You checked. Okay. Anyway, it looks like we lucked out. All right. All right. So we'll go through each word. I think instead of going through every synonym of all these 5 verses, we'll do 2 verses, and then I'll read the rest myself, because there'll be a lot of chanting. Yeah, okay. Why don't we just do 1? It'll be easier. Okay. Amanitvam, adambitvam, ahimsa, chantir, arjavam, acharyopasanam, shaucham, stairyam, atma, vinigraha, amanitvam adambitvam, ahimsa chantir arjavam, acharyopasanam shaucham, stairyam atma vinigraha, amanitvam adambitvam, ahimsa chantir arjavam, acharyopasanam shaucham, stairyam atma vinigraha, amanitvam adambitvam, ahimsa chantir arjavam, acharyopasanam shaucham, stairyam atma vinigraha. Go ahead, Russ. Amanitvam adambitvam, ahimsa chantir arjavam, acharyopasanam shaucham, stairyam atma vinigraha. You want to try it? Amanitvam adambitvam, ahimsa chantir arjavam, acharyopasanam shaucham, stairyam atma vinigraha. Go ahead. Amanitvam adambitvam. All right, start again. Amanitvam adambitvam, ahimsa chantir arjavam, acharyopasanam shaucham, stairyam atma vinigraha. Amanitvam adambitvam, ahimsa chantir arjavam, acharyopasanam shaucham, stairyam atma vinigraha. Did either of you want to try? You don't have to try. It's okay. It's okay. All right. I'm just going to read through the Sanskrit, and then we'll read the English translation, I think, at this point. Indriyarteshu vairagyam anahankara evacha janma mrityu jara vyari dukkha doshanudarshanam asaktir anabhishvanga putra dara griharishu nityam cha samachittattvam ishtanishtopapatishu mahichananya yogena bhaktira vyabhicharini viviktadesha sevitvam aratir janasangsadi adhyatma jnana nityadvam tattva jnanartha darshanam eta jnanam iti proktam ajnanam yadatonyata. Translation. Humility, pridelessness, nonviolence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master. Cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, detachment, freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest, even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unalloyed devotion to me, aspiring to live in a solitary place, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization, and philosophical search for the absolute truth. All these I declare to be knowledge, and besides this, whatever there may be is ignorance. And of course, this is Lord Krishna speaking to Arjuna. Okay, we're not going to go through this whole purport. It's a long purport. We'll do a little bit at a time in the next few days. Purport. This process of knowledge is sometimes misunderstood by less intelligent men as being the interaction of the field of activity. But actually, this is the real process of knowledge. If one accepts this process, then the possibility of approaching the absolute truth exists. This is not the interaction of the 24 elements as described before. This is actually the means to get out of the entanglement of those elements. The embodied soul is entrapped by the body, which is a casing made of the 24 elements. And the process of knowledge, as described here, is the means to get out of it. Of all the descriptions of the process of knowledge, the most important point is described in the first line of the 11th verse. Mahi chanan niyogena bhaktir avyabhicharini. The process of knowledge terminates in unalloyed devotional service to the Lord. So if one does not approach or is not able to approach the transcendental service of the Lord, then the other 19 items are of no particular value. But if one takes to devotional service in full Krishna consciousness, the other 19 items automatically develop within him. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 5.18.12, Yas yasti bhakti bhagavadgita kinchana sarvaya gunais tatra samasate sura. All the good qualities of knowledge develop in one who has attained the stage of devotional service. The principle of accepting a spiritual master, as mentioned in the 8th verse, is essential. Even for one who takes to devotional service, it is most important. Transcendental life begins when one accepts a bona fide spiritual master. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, clearly states here that this process of knowledge is the actual path. Anything speculated beyond this is nonsense. Okay, before we get into each individual thing, we'll have a little review. Om Jnana Timarandrasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, this chapter began with 2 questions by Arjuna, which we'll just review because Krishna is systematically answering them. So the first, Arjuna asks the question, My dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, and the field and the knower of the field, and of knowledge and the object of knowledge. So Krishna systematically answered these questions, and he started with Prakriti and the Purusha, the enjoyer, and like that. So we're just going to review. There's only a few verses here. So he says, you should, Sayana Bart, I mean descendant of Bart, you should understand that I am also the knower. I'm sorry. The first answer is in that first section. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, this body, O son of Kunti, is called the field, and one who knows this body is called the knower of the field. So, Arjuna uses those words Chaitra and Chaitra Gya. Gya is a word derived from the word knowledge, jnana, and it means a knower. So, the Prakriti Purusham Chaiva, that's the question. It said, and the answer is, Idam Sharinam Chaitra Mitrabhide. The Chaitra, the field of activity for all of us, begins with this body. Even if we're involved with something at a distance, it's impinging on our senses. We understand it because we see it, we hear it, we feel it, we can even smell it. So all of that is coming into the senses, and that's what our field of activity is. If we have some problem hearing, seeing, or so forth, then our ability to understand, our chaitra is damaged, and our interaction with the world is distorted. So the first thing is done that we have this field of activity that is this body. Now, who is it that is acting on through the body or through the senses? That's the Purusha. And one who knows the body is called the knower of the field. Now, Krishna gives a different word than Purusha. He calls Kshetragya, the Kshetra and the field and the knower of the field. So we are the knowers of the field. This came up at the beginning of the Gita, Krishna's instructions in the 2nd chapter, where the whole first 20 verses of his instruction to Arjuna was hammering out this point that the body is temporary. It's just like a suit of clothes that eventually wear out and we discard it. He uses that analogy. And we get a new set. And the self is indestructible. We are not burned, we are not wet, we don't change. We're unchangeable. So we've lived before in different bodies and we'll live again in future bodies. Different kshetras, different fields for activity. Sometimes they can be subhuman, sometimes superhuman. There are all kinds of fields that we can enter into according to our work. So that's basic knowledge, and Krishna's kind of reviewing, expanding on it here in the latter part of the Gita. So, then he goes on, and he says a very important in text 3, O Sayan, Bharata, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies. So in other words, every single body has two knowers. It's individual soul and the super soul. Krishna's expanded in there. And he knows, he oversees, he permits, he's understanding everything that we're doing. And when we take up genuine spiritual life or devotional service, we connect with the super soul, maybe not directly right away, but through his representative as the guru who's mentioned in this purport and the books of knowledge like Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is speaking directly to us here. That's why Prabhupada he took so much trouble to present the Sanskrit so that we could hear the sound. The sound itself, even if you don't understand the meaning, is potent. These verses, we're actually hearing the words. So we have the field of called the body, the knower of the field, and the super knower of the field. So this is he's answering the question. Then now he says, I'm going to explain to you in more detail what this field is, and he describes. He says, Krishna says, it's not this is not my words. I'm quoting the Rishis and the Brahma Sutra. I mean, he doesn't really need to quote anything, but he's saying this is the way of presenting spiritual knowledge by reference to the realized and the revealed books of knowledge. So he says, Brahma Sutra, and then what does he say? Then he analyzes the body and the 5 great elements. This is earth, water, fire, air, ether. This is progressively more subtle. We're so familiar with these, you don't even think about them. Solid matter, gases, liquids, radiant energy. But the ones that count more and more is the subtle ones, the internal ones, the mind, intelligence, ego. This is not the Mahabhutas. These are yes, you can count so. The 5 great elements, yeah, those are the ones we're so familiar with. Then the false ego, intelligence, the unmanifested, the 10 senses, and the mind. Now, how do we get 10 senses? In 3rd grade we learned there were 5 senses, right? So the active senses, those are all counted. The hands, hands are, how we interact with the world in many ways. Hands, the feet, the voice, very important, reproductive, excretory senses. So these 10 is all part of our field, right? And this is what the soul has to work with in relating to the outside world. As simple as that. And then you have 5 senses, then desire, hatred, happiness, distress. These are all internal states. They're considered in summary to be the field of activities. And then the present verse where he starts to list these elements of knowledge. This is one of his questions. What is knowledge and what is the goal of knowledge? Which will be very interesting. So now, if we have no questions on that little introduction, we can go and start reading the substance of the purport, and Prabhupada goes through each of these 20 elements and describes them. It's very thorough and very, very illuminating. Okay. As for the knowledge outlined here, the items may be analyzed as follows. Humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. The material conception of life makes us very eager to receive honor from others, but from the point of view of a man in perfect knowledge, who knows that he is not this body, anything, honor or dishonor, pertaining to this body is useless. And I feel, every so often to enunciate this. is that Prabhupada learned English in the early 20th century in India from English teachers, and there was a bias toward, male pronouns and so forth. When he says man, he means human being, obviously. He had many, many lady disciples, and they were very exalted, and to this day they're wonderful. So, the material conception of life makes us very eager to receive honor from others, but from the point of view of a man in perfect knowledge who knows he is not the body, anything, honor or dishonor pertaining to this body is useless. One should not be hankering after this material deception. People are very anxious to be famous for their religion, and consequently sometimes it is found that without understanding the principles of religion, one enters into some group which is not actually following religious principles and then wants to advertise himself as a religious mentor. As for actual advancement in spiritual science, one should have a test to see how far he is progressing. He could judge by these items, the ones that he's going through now. Now Prabhupada skips over to nonviolence, ahimsa. But this adambitvam is also important. They seem to be synonymous, the way he defines them, right? Amanitvam, adambitvam. Humility and pridelessness. Can anyone tell me the distinction? Not really. But what adambitva has is this idea of pretension, of false pride. And it often means that one presents oneself as very religious and advanced spiritually, but really isn't. It has not followed the principles, and but is doing it as a con? What would we call it? And this is very common in the present age of Kali. So that pridelessness, adamba, means hypocrisy, and hypocrisy always means presenting yourself as something you're not for the purpose of getting honor, getting wealth, whatever it may be. That's pridelessness. Humility, it is something is basic. If you're humble, and you're not going to have a damba, but it's mentioned separately because it has that element of pretension to it. So then he goes on to nonviolence. Nonviolence is generally taken to mean not killing or destroying the body, but actually nonviolence means not to put others into distress. People in general are trapped by ignorance in the material concept of life, and they perpetually suffer material pains. So unless one elevates people to spiritual knowledge, one is practicing violence. One should try his best to distribute real knowledge to the people so that they may become enlightened and leave the material entanglement. That is nonviolence. So this is a very important idea, because nonviolence, just the very word, means not doing something. Okay, I'm a vegetarian, I don't hurt people, and I'm a nonviolent person. But here, Prabhupada is saying that one should become knowledgeable of what real spiritual knowledge is, and what's the purpose of it? The purpose of it, there's this phrase. What is that? I forget the phrase. Sarve bhavantu sukhino bhavantu, something like that. It means it's one of these Vedic phrases. It means may everyone be happy, may everyone be pleased and happy. In other words, it's a very positive thing. It's not just that you're going around not hurting anyone, but you're cultivating understanding of how suffering can be relieved, and you're actively doing that. And that's real nonviolence. There's a positive element to it. So that's what a real ahimsa means. And everyone knows, that Hare Krishnas are vegetarians, but Prabhupada said we're not just vegetarians, we're prasadamarians. Meaning that, yes, Krishna, when he recommends patram pushpam palam toyam, this is the kind of food you should offer to me to make prasadam. And it's understood that patram is a leaf. It means that, vegetables and grains and milk, water, things like that. But in no case, hurting the fish. We don't eat fish, and poultry, and what to speak of cows, There's no need. I've been a vegetarian longer than I've been Hare Krishna. I was a couple of years vegetarian before, and still breathing, still walking. It's much healthier, it's much cheaper, and it's morally correct, and it really is a sign of great callousness that you feel that you have to eat the meat. There's no need for it, and there's so much suffering behind it. They've made laws in the places where there's a lot of cattle raising and everything. You can't go in there and take pictures and publish them. because they know if people really see what's going on there, no one's going to want to eat meat. Oh, I can't do it. It's not necessary. So that's basic ahimsa, but there's also this proactive element to it, that if you have, just like a doctor, if you have a cure for a disease, says it's not like, oh, how can I make so much money? The pharmaceutical companies, they're in it for the money. And there's this whole thing of raising the price. Was it diabetes? The insulin is so high because it's horrible. If you have a cure, okay, you can make your living on it, but to just turn it into a profit game, this whole health system is like that. So real nonviolence means to help others and have the mood is there with Prahlad Maharaj, where he says, Naivod Padadodotri Avaitadanyas. This is a prayer to Lord Nrsingadev. You know Lord Nrsingadev? No? Okay, okay. I'm sorry. So Krishna appears in different forms for different purposes. So this is a form where one of his dear devotees, a little child named Prahlad, was being tormented by his demonic father, who was so powerful, he was ruling the whole universe. He even tried to kill him, but Prahlad was so pure and so fixed in his meditation that he was protected by Krishna. But finally, Hiranyakashipu, his name was, the combination of gold and soft bedding. He tried to kill his son, so Nrsingadev came to protect him, and he finally killed the Hiranyakashipu. So at that point, Prahlad offers all these prayers, and one of the prayers speaks about just what this idea of nonviolence and everything we're talking about. And he says, "My dear Lord Nrsingadev, I am not disturbed in any way. Naivod Vijay Padadodachya Vaitaranyas." This word is a Vaitarani river. I'm already with you across the ocean of birth and death, so I'm not troubled by anything. And besides that, at any time I can chant your glories and immerse my mind in an ocean of nectar. I can chant Hare Krishna. But, Shoche, I'm lamenting. I'm lamenting for these fools who don't know about you and are struggling so hard in this material world, birth, death, to glean a little sense gratification, pleasure, which is their worst enemy, that pleasure, because that keeps you coming back and back and back to try to have more, for your next birth. So he wants to try to give them God consciousness and introduce them to Nrsingadev. So that's why I'm lamenting for others, So this is the mood of a devotee. That's nonviolence. Then he goes on to the next quality, which is titiksha. What is it? It's not called titiksha. Ahimsa, chantir, which is tolerance. Okay, so tolerance means that one should be practiced to bear insult and dishonor from others. If one is engaged in the advancement of spiritual knowledge, there will be so many insults and so much dishonor from others. This is expected because material nature is so constituted. Even a boy like Prahlad, I swear I didn't read ahead. Even a boy like Prahlad, who only 5 years old, was engaged in the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, was endangered when his father became antagonistic to his devotion. The father tried to kill him in so many ways, but Prahlad tolerated him. So there may be so many impediments to making advancement in spiritual knowledge, but we should be tolerant and continue our progress with determination. So there's different words, just like in English, there are different words for the same thing, but with slight different meanings. So chantir is kind of encompasses this idea of forgiveness. It's pain on a subtle level, which can be very deep. Someone who you love, insults you or rejects you or whatever, and you have to tolerate that. But there's also titiksha, which means tolerating physical pain and so forth, and Prahlad did both of those. So, but chantir is oftentimes even more painful because it means forgiving those who insult you or disrespect you. That's important, very essential. Okay, that was there. And simplicity, is that where we are? Simplicity means that without diplomacy, one should be so straightforward that he can disclose the real truth even to an enemy. As for acceptance of the spiritual master, that is essential. That's acharya upasana. because without the instruction of a bona fide spiritual master, one cannot progress in the spiritual science. One should approach the spiritual master with all humility and offer him all services so that he will be pleased to bestow his blessings upon the disciple. Because a bona fide spiritual master is a representative of Krishna, if he bestows any blessings upon his disciple, that will make the disciple immediately advanced without the disciples following the regulative principles. Or the regulative principles will be easier for one who has served the spiritual master without reservation. So, there's so many statements about the importance of the guru, but one that comes to mind that's very famous, Lord Chaitanya, who's Krishna himself, who started this Hare Krishna chanting. He's the one who popularized and taught his disciples, and they carried it on, wrote very important books. And he, in his teachings to Rupa Goswami, who was one of his top two disciples, he and his brother, he has this verse, Brahmande Brahmate Kon Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. So the Bhakti Lata Bij, the word Bij means seed. And Bhakti Lata is like a creeper of Bhakti. The development of love of God, of devotion, is compared in the heart that this is a plant that's growing, a very luxurious plant. And you have to be careful because there's so many weeds, material desires and all of these things, that you have to be careful, don't choke off that plant. So, but the key element there is by the mercy of the Guru and Krishna, one gets the seed. First comes the mercy of the Guru. Just like I like to refer, practically every class, to how Srila Prabhupada took on so much suffering, so much austerity, in order to bring us what we are enjoying now. This book itself, and I know because I was involved in the production of the book, and at a later stage, but I know exactly how difficult it was to produce this book. He came to America. He didn't have a whole team of Sanskrit scholars and editors and things, to produce the book. He didn't have any money. He didn't have a place. But he had great faith in the holy name, and he had his instruction of his own guru, and he had the blessings of Krishna and Lord Chaitanya. So even at that elderly age, he had 3 heart attacks. One was almost fatal, and but he soldiered on. And with great effort, the books were produced, the society was grown, and the knowledge developed. And what he was doing was like planting these seeds of faith in the process. By the chanting of the holy name and holding these kirtans and having the devotees go out and training them, they were feeling the benefits of bhakti. You can feel it in so many different levels, even physical energy. I remember in my youth, I joined kind of late a bit. I was 25 already when I joined. But I was in pretty good shape, and I would go out in the street, and I just loved to dance. I'll tell you a story. There's a book called the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and in there's Lord Chaitanya, and many of his followers are described. So one of his devotees was called Vikreshwar Pandit. Now he was a scholar, but he was really into dancing and chanting. So much so, this is a fact, this isn't he could dance on the street and full on jumping and dancing for 72 hours straight. He was empowered. And so I said, I'm going to see if I can do that. Because we didn't go up for 72 hours straight, but we'd go up for 3 hours straight. So I was thinking, well, maybe So I was kind of athletic when I was a kid. So anyway, I needed the right shoes. You can't do it in sandals, right? You have to have these sneakers. We call them sneakers in those days. This is 1973. So we had, it was the hippie days. Everyone thinks the 60s, but it kind of bled over into the early 70s too. So we had the Sunday feast. A lot of people would come, young people, old people. And we had a shoe room where you would check your shoes, and because there was a big crowd, and we get their number, So some people came, they would come with shoes, and they would leave without shoes. So eventually we had some shoes accumulating. Hey, Prabhu, could you sit on this side? This is the men's side over here. Thanks. You're okay, you're on the men's side. So anyway, I said, if I'm going to do this, I need the right shoes. So I went there, and I found really nice sneakers that just fit me perfectly. They weren't worn out or anything. I said, okay, this is Krishna's blessing. So So I was going out, and I was jumping and doing that. But at that time, I was also eating a lot. I wasn't fat, but I was eating a lot more than I eat now. And that means a lot of halva and a lot of things like that. Halva is pretty heavy stuff. Anyways, it was just an important part of our day was this chanting together. And at that time, we had 3 hours a day of Harinam. This is prescribed for everybody. Plus morning and evening. Like we have our morning program, the Mangalarti. But there was a big kirtan at 6, I think it was 7 o'clock or 6:30, where all the devotees gathered in the temple, and the lights were on, unlike the morning when it was much more meditative, The lights were on, everyone was dancing and chanting. So that was, and we just, Prabhupada came, he came twice or 3 times when I was there in Brooklyn, twice in Brooklyn and twice in LA when I was there. And he was so much revered because he had given us this process. He gave us the knowledge, he gave us the process, and we were all feeling the great benefits of bhakti. So this is why the Guru is so important. It says that Krishna comes to the sincere soul searching for the truth, for God, in the form of the Guru. Someone who is not out to exploit the disciples, but is simply out to give the knowledge, give the process, and give facility for practicing. And that's exactly what Prabhupada did. See, now here's a sincere soul right here. He may not be able to practice, but he's just give him a little. Don't hit him, but tap on him. Maybe he'll go away. See. All right. Send him to Jessica. She's very merciful. If you can, get him out. Yeah. Yeah. He belongs in the garden, because it's a bit dangerous here. You can get stepped on, even without shoes. You may need some. Yeah, you need it. One of the paper towels or something. So the spiritual master is so important, and the more we recognize that and take advantage of the teachings and the instruction, the more we can progress in devotional service. Okay, so we're up to simplicity, I think. Yeah. Simplicity. Simplicity, let's see, what is the word for simplicity? It is shaucham. Well, shaucham means cleanliness. Did we do cleanliness? Okay. Oh, it's out of order, but it's the next one. Simplicity means that without diplomacy, one should be so straightforward that he can disclose the real truth even to an enemy. As for acceptance of the spiritual master, that is essential, because without the instruction of a bona fide spiritual master, one cannot progress in the spiritual science. One should approach the spiritual master with all humility and offer him all services so that he will be pleased to bestow a blessing upon a disciple. Because a bona fide spiritual master is a representative of Krishna, if he bestows any blessing upon his disciple, that will make the disciple immediately advanced without the disciples following regular principles. Okay, we read that. Cleanliness is essential for making advancement in spiritual life. There are 2 kinds of cleanliness, external and internal. External cleanliness means taking a bath, but for internal cleanliness, one has to think of Krishna always and chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This process cleans the accumulated dust of past karma from the mind. Now, that's a cue for me to give you this very, very important verse that was written by Lord Chaitanya himself about the chanting of the holy name. The whole movement is based on these 8 verses, and the first one is very rich and full of quality, and it's exactly about this. So the verse goes like this, and I made a little poem out of it. He says, Cheto darpana marjanam, bhavamahada vagni nirvapanam, shreya kaidava chandrika vatadanam, vidyavadhu jivanam, anandam buddhivardhanam, pratibadham purnamita swadanam, sarvatmasnapadam param vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. All glories to the chanting of Sri Krishna's holy names, which easily extinguishes samsara's blazing flames by polishing the lust-encrusted mirror of the heart. that chanting is the waxing moon that knows the secret art of causing the white lotus of good fortune to unfurl its petals far and wide throughout this bleak and blighted world, of transcendental knowledge which will take us to life's goal. The chanting of the name of Krishna is the life and soul. The ocean of ecstatic bliss floods far beyond its bounds wherever Krishna's merciful and mystic name resounds. Indeed, whenever Krishna's name is sung in congregation, at every step one tastes the joy that knows no limitation. So here with great attention, as I earnestly request, please chant Sri Krishna's holy name and be supremely blessed. The soothing nectar of the name will bathe your consciousness, bestow pure love for Krishna, and eradicate distress. The whole movement is right there in that one verse. So it was brought to mind because Prabhupada talks about the cleanliness, right? The cleanliness means taking a bath, but that's external cleanliness. Internal cleanliness means chanting Hare Krishna. And it's interesting because the whole process is like this idea of uncovering what's already there. Just like if you clean your room, you can probably see as it really is. Oh yeah, I didn't even, you can see it in its natural state. So our natural state is this purity, but by being in the material world for so long, many, many births, we've accumulated all kinds of unwanted things like lust, anger, greed, illusion, depression, anger, sociopathy. I mean, the pure soul can even turn into like the most harmful person because of the modes of nature. So these are all, this is all a form of dirt on the heart. And that's cleansed by this chanting of Hare Krishna. This is the sound vibration. That's why it is said in another verse. You all know this verse. Hare Nama. Hare Nama. Hare Nama eva kevalam kalo nasteva 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 gataranyata. We used to sing this on Hare Nama. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama eva kevalam kalo nasteva 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 gataranyata. Roughly. Which means if you want to achieve the supreme goal of life, in this age when dissension and chaos abound, there is no other way, there is no other way, there is no other way that can ever be found but to chant Krishna's name, but to chant Krishna's name, but to chant Krishna's name with a stout-hearted vow, and to pray, O Lord Krishna, O friend of the poor, let my head ever unto your lotus feet bow. So that last part is taken from another verse about how we should try to be more humble than a blade of grass. Because in the first verse he gives all the benefits of chanting, but one has to cultivate it properly. And so in the second verse, Lord Chaitanya pretends to be someone who has no taste for chanting. He's taken the role. My Lord, you're so merciful. Krishna, Govinda, and Keshava too, your names have no end, and in each of them you have invested your potencies, leaving none out. Whenever we want, we can chant them without the slightest restriction of time or of place. O Lord, who can fathom your infinite grace? But I am so wretched and devoid of all shame that I haven't developed a taste for your name. So then this third verse is like a key verse. We're supposed to wear it around our necks. In other words, never forget it when we chant. And it's all about humility and tolerance, just like we've been reading, isn't it? Trinadapi sunichena tororapi sahishnuna amanina manadena kirtaniyak sadahari. More humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, to think all praise belongs to others, none belongs to me. Such qualities attract the Lord to bless one with the power to chant His name incessantly until the final hour. It's exactly pertinent to what we're reading. Tolerance, humility. So this is, if we're able to chant with that mood, then Krishna very quickly recognizes and you advance nicely. So it all fits in. Cleanliness. Now, this is a challenge because we're not habituated to all these things, so we need steadiness. Steadiness means that one should be very determined to make progress in spiritual life. Without such determination, one cannot make tangible progress. And self-control means that one should not accept anything which is detrimental to the path of spiritual progress. One should become accustomed to this and reject anything which is against the path of spiritual progress. This is real renunciation. The senses are so strong that they are always anxious to have sense gratification. One should not cater to these demands, which are not necessary. The senses should only be gratified to keep the body fit so that one can discharge his duty in advancing in spiritual life. The most important and uncontrollable sense is the tongue. If one can control the tongue, then there is every possibility of controlling the other senses.
The function of the tongue is to taste and to vibrate. Therefore, by systematic regulation, tongue should always be engaged in tasting the remnants of foodstuffs offered to Krishna and chanting Hare Krishna. As far as the eyes are concerned, they should not be allowed to see anything but the beautiful form of Krishna. That will control the eyes. Similarly, the ears should be engaged in hearing about Krishna, and the nose in smelling the flowers offered to Krishna. This is the process of devotional service, and it is understood here that the Bhagavad Gita is simply expounding the science of devotional service. Devotional service is the main and sole objective. Unintelligent commentators on the Bhagavad Gita try to divert the mind of the reader to other subjects, but there is no other subject in the Bhagavad Gita than devotional service. So, how to control the tongue? So, it's not just the Hare Krishna mantra that we're chanting. Just like this Bhagavad Gita, this is also kirtan. This is also a way of controlling the tongue. By reading the Bhagavad Gita out loud, learning these verses, it's not so hard after some time, and to be able to chant them. And there is such a wonderful treasure house of descriptions of Krishna and songs and beautiful literature that one can absorb the mind in, and one can share with others. And in this way, Krishna within the heart, he becomes very pleased, and he gives you. The first thing that happens is that he gives you indifference to all these other things that you practically controlled us. You know, when I grew up in very close to Manhattan, and I didn't know at the time, but that Manhattan, New York, was the center of addiction, heavy addiction, heroin addiction. And so they had this phrase, you know, monkey on your back. I've got this monkey on my back. It means that you can't stop it. It's such a strong push that the sense that you have to have it, you know. That thing, and I know, you know, people smoking Prabhupada, even cigarettes can be like that. There it is, right on the pack. I remember when they came out with that, the early '60s, I think it was. Attention, or notice, cigarette smoking is hazardous to your health, or maybe they had first can be hazardous to your health. Now is hazardous to your health, but still, okay, cool. I know it's on there. Boom, light up. In other words, the senses are so addicted to that particular thing that it overrides the intelligence. And this is a situation that's practically universal. So, isn't it wonderful? You can become so attracted to Krishna. Krishna releases you from that. It's no longer, it's not even an option. It's like, see, I wouldn't do that in a million years. Whereas before, you know, when you join, there's all these pulls and pushes. But if you can, you take it seriously and you follow the instructions, then gradually you're released from that. So that's an important part of devotional service, the benefits of devotional service, and they're preliminary because it ultimately becomes such a joyous experience. Like you know, just an example of so many wonderful vibrations that you can enjoy. Which are, you know, expansions of the Hare Krishna mantra. The Hare Krishna mantra is pure transcendence. There's Krishna there in His holy name, and everything is there. There's no question about it. But all the great devotees and Haridas Thakur, like Haridas Thakur is the acharya for chanting the holy name. We chant our 16 rounds, and sometimes it's difficult to get through the 16 rounds or to concentrate on each name for the 16 rounds if we're still trying. Haridas Thakur chanted 192 rounds every day, and he was always floating in an ocean of bliss, and he was completely indifferent. Even when they tried to, he was born a Muslim and he converted, which is not done at that time. This is when India was being run by the Muslims, a large part of it. And so they tried to execute him, but just like Prahlad, they were beating and beating and beating 22 marketplaces. And he wasn't dying, he wasn't even feeling any pain. He was just chanting Hare Krishna, so absorbed that he was transcendental. Lord Chaitanya was taking care of him. And so eventually the executioners were pleading with him, you know, if you don't die, then we're going to get executed. He said, oh, if that's the case, then I'll die. So he went into samadhi, which looked like death, you know, it can be, and he wasn't breathing. He said, okay, so they thought he wasn't really dead. They brought him back, and they said, well, what should we do with the body? To the sheriff. And he says, well, should we bury it here? No, it'll become a place of pilgrimage. You better just throw it in the river, the Ganges River. So they throw him in the river, and of course he came to, swam across, and said, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Said, okay, you can do whatever you want. You know, so so and he himself, he would meet with the devotees, and he would relish all these other vibrations. So I'll give you one sample of the vibration that Lord Chaitanya and would relish with his devotees. Written by Rupa Goswami, great poet and great devotee. So he's writing about Krishna entering the forest in Vrindavan, and he's praising the way the forest is greeting him and pleasing him. So Kvachir bringi geetam kvachadanilabangi shishirita Kvachin valli lasyam kvachadamalamalli padimala Kvachandara shali kadakapalapadi dasabaro vishikhanam vrindam pramadayati vrindavanamidam. Now you can get absorbed in that, and it doesn't matter, you can be 85, you can be 5 years old, and it's a transcendental experience. So what he's describing there, Krishna is saying, Kwachi brings somewhere the bees are singing beautifully, you know, pleasing my ears. Somewhere the breezes are coming down from the Malaya hills where there's all this sandalwood, so it's very fragrant, and cooling the whole atmosphere. Kvachid bringi geetam kratadana shishidata kvachid valli lasyam. And somewhere the little twigs and the vines and things are dancing in the breeze. So he's seeing that for his eyes. Each sense is covered here. The ears with the singing of the bees, and his touch with the cool breezes. And now he's seeing this beautiful dance of the flowers and everything. And then the molika flowers are producing all this fragrance. Pomegranates, the ripe pomegranates are so ripe they're bursting, and their beautiful juice is coming onto the ground, so they can taste it. You can taste. So that's in this way. This forest of Vrindavan is pleasing my senses in all kinds of ways. Now it's just Sanskrit syllables and everything, but there's a potency behind it, and that can be completely satisfying if you're absorbed in hearing with devotees about Krishna, and they give you a song and this and that, and that's how you enjoy. And the basic thing is kirtan, hearing Krishna's name, chanting Krishna's name, but it all expands into these other things, and Lord Chaitanya showed us that. So that's wholesome enjoyment. It doesn't it doesn't cost anything, and it's completely wholesome, and it nourishes the soul, and eventually leave your body and go peacefully and go back to Godhead. That's the program. And Srila Prabhupada has given us so much of that. It is Bhagavatam and his nectar of devotion and the teaching of Lord Chaitanya. We can relish. That's a verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's quoted in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So it's almost looks like we have time for one more little poem. So this is one about the holy name. When we chant Hare Krishna, we're chanting the name of Radha, Hare, which is Hara in Bhagavad, and Krishna. Even the word Rama is another name for Krishna, means full enjoyer, you can think of it. So this is a verse by Raghunath Das Goswami, another disciple of Lord Chaitanya, one of the 6 Goswamis. And some of you have heard this before, but it's ever fresh. Radheti nama navasundara siddhu mugdham Krishneti nama manodaba dagara dugdham Savakshanam sudabhiraga himena ramyam Kritvata daiva pibame vasane chadarte. So this is an instruction to his tongue. He's saying, begins describing, an excellent fresh nectar drink with endless subtle tastes. Such is the name of Radha, by whom all 3 worlds are graced. Condensed milk that is wonderfully delicious, thick and sweet. Such is the name of Krishna, in whom all attractions meet. Now mix these drinks, O thirsty tongue, and add the cooling, fragrant spice of love. A prize the wise will try to buy at any price. And then at every moment drink this beverage most fine, and make my heart supremely blissful, peaceful, and divine. So we can instruct our tongue to do that. And we have practice in our upcoming kirtan. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for listening. And anyone online, Hari Bol. And we will proceed with this purport tomorrow. I think we'll conclude it tomorrow. And we are on false ego. I think false egos. Page 541. Oh, Hare Krishna.